right, we are back live with the Osceola's Monday edition of Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham, and I am joined by the Osceola's Bob Ferrante, Charles Fishbein, and Curt Weiler. And guys, it was a very busy weekend, a very busy month at on the Florida State campus from a camp, unofficial and official visit standpoint, and it culminated with the largest official visit weekend of June this past weekend with 14 high school recruits on campus for their official visits, including 5 kids that are committed to Florida State, and Luke Croman-Hawk, Landon Thomas, wide receiver Camden Hurd, safety CJ Hurd, Camden Fryer, so there's too many names, CJ Hurd, and then, of course, wide receiver TJ Abrams. And we're going to jump right into it, and we're going to break down all 14 of these visits, and we're going to start kind of where we left off on Friday when Fish and I did the preview, and that's with wide receiver commit TJ Abrams from Dunbar High School down in Fort Myers. Guys, I think we were all there when he spoke, or most of us were there when he spoke, and of course, he said, among other things, that he was going to quit using percentages to predict how much he was committed to one particular school or not. And while he did say that his commitment to Florida State was stronger after this visit, he went on to say that it could be as late as December before he makes his final decision, of course. So he said a whole lot to say nothing, right? But let's talk about TJ Abrams. And Curt, I'll start with you. Just what was your take on what he said?
Yeah, I mean, he kind of, did the whole say a lot without saying a ton type thing, because he said some things that were promising. I mean, he talked pretty candidly about how, kind of Mike Norvell and Ron Dugans are okay with him kind of taking visits. They don't want to be, a Clemson where it's when you're committed, you're not taking visits elsewhere. You're truly committed with us. They want him to be able to go see other places, with the belief being that that he'll come back to Florida State as kind of the right choice for him. Their kind of belief in themselves and Florida State. But the longer this goes on, and the more, high-profile receivers that Florida State keeps recruiting, and I think is in good position with, you wonder if he stays a part of this class. It's going to be a big part of – this is going to be a big receiver class for Florida State. There are 4 committed at the moment, and they're in on quite a few more. But, it's a weird situation. You wonder if Florida State is willing to keep playing this game with him until December, or if there's a bit of maybe a moment of, are you in or are you out, because we need to know in terms of recruiting other guys.
Well, and that boat could get full real quick at the receiver position. As you said, there are a lot of people that they're committed or talking to, including several this week who are very high on Florida State. We're going to get to those guys later. But, Fish, we've always said that this is a math problem for FSU at wide receiver. Is BJ Gibson going to play wide receiver? Is he going to play DB? We don't know that, but we do know Camden Fryer is going to be a wide receiver. TJ Abrams is going to be a wide receiver. Now we know McCoy could play both. But, Fish, how do you see this shaking out as we continue down the road? How does Florida State work their way through TJ Abrams and his – listen, we all know that it's never official, and we caught some flack on the board last Friday for saying that Luke was set and Landon Thomas was set. Listen, the reality of it is it would take a lot for those 2 guys to change their mind, I believe. And we understand the reality that it's never over until they actually send in the paperwork, right? Or I don't think they have to send it in. They just confirm it online, something like that. But anyway, long story short, it's not over until mid-December. Fish, how do you see this playing out with TJ Abrams?
Yeah, I like what they're doing as far as how they're recruiting that position. I always believe you recruit at a position of strength at all these positions, and don't put yourself in a position where you have to take somebody not as good later on. They're offering a lot of guys. If these kids want to be in the class, that's fine. But they're locking up these guys that are good, but recruiting above them. And if those guys above them decide to come and these guys want to play games, you just say, hey, goodbye. I think Abrams is a good player. I don't think he's good enough to hold a spot all the way till the end of till National Signing Day. If he doesn't make a decision soon, I'd make the other kids that they're recruiting will make that decision for him if they decide to come. So he's got a spot, but it works both ways. They can go out and recruit these guys, and if one of these other guys that came in this weekend decide they want to come, Abrams may be left out in the cold, and that choice will be made for him. So, yeah, the Florida State staff may say that they're recruiting, that they want these guys to take their visits and they're okay with it. But at the same time, they're not going to get played. They've already been through that early on in Coach Norvell's career at Florida State. They're not going to go that route anymore. They're going to basically allow this thing to make the decisions for them.
Yeah, I don't think this staff likes doing a lot of recruiting over commits. I think they kind of like, having guys locked in and not like dumping guys later. But I think a situation like this, you kind of have to, because he does seem to be wavering. He's been to A&M. He's been to Florida. He's been to Colorado, although it sounds like he's not going back. I think he got asked if he's going back yesterday. He said, definitely not. I don't know what happened there, but Colorado ain't for everybody under Dion, it would seem.
That's right. Well, it's cold out there. It's cold out there.
I don't know if that's what it was about, but maybe.
Listen, just interesting. Bob, any thoughts on the Abrams thing from how you read what he said?
Yeah, the interesting thought I had was when he said good to be back home. It was an interesting choice of words, especially for a prospect who has not been home since January, since that was his last prior trip to Tallahassee. So it was an interesting choice of words there. I'm kind of with you guys. He's definitely flirting with other schools. How much flirting are you doing? Getting into a relationship is a question mark. But I think, as we've hit on a lot, Florida State's wide receiver recruiting has come a long way. The commitment list has come a long way. The position group has come a long way. Obviously, hope Abrams sticks. If he doesn't, you don't feel all that badly just because the pieces are there already in this class, and they're pursuing other guys too.
Yeah, well, and we're going to get to some of those other guys in a second, but I think probably the other storyline fishing of the four storylines fishing I talked about on Friday, the other one was obviously the offensive line group. Jonathan Daniels is very shifty and elusive for a man that's 6'5", 290 pounds. We did not get a chance to talk to him after his official visit. We believe he was snuck out the back door because he did not come through the front door of the Moore Center because there were about 8 men waiting for him to talk to him. So, but listen, we heard the war chant being played a lot when he was in the building, and Curt, we think we picked up on some code, but that way. But anyway, Fish, Jonathan Daniels. A week ago, we thought he was solid to Florida State. He hasn't made OVs to Georgia and Kentucky. There was a report out yesterday that he did give a quick quote to one of the recruiting services saying that a decision could be soon. Fish, what is your read on where Jonathan Daniels is with Florida State?
Yeah, I think Florida State sits in a great position. I really think this came down to they're putting a little more pressure on him because there's a need now to at least get one of these guys in the boat before the summer's out. Daniels has been one of these kids that I thought they liked, but they were kind of seeing what other options were out there. Those options fell by the wayside, and now Daniels is a guy that they focused in on. I think he's going to play guard in college. I know he's listed. I've seen anywhere from 6'2 3/4" to now he's 6'5". This kid's grown in the last month. I still think he's a guard, and he'll take that Xander Mella spot that once he went to USC. So he's a very good player. I think he'll be a great addition to their class, but he's someone that I do think is going to play inside. And
well, I can tell you this: he's bigger than 6'2". Whoever's got that down is wrong. Because he's a lot taller than I am, and I'm right at 6'2". So, but anyway, listen, we were trying to read too much, and probably until when the war chant was playing yesterday, there were unofficial visits still going on with official visits, but they did play the war chant several times when he was in the building, meeting with Mike Norvell and Alex Atkins, and of course the other offensive lineman that they had in town was Ty Hilton, who told us outside after that they are actually recruiting him to play tackle and center. So Fish, again, we thought these guys were being recruited by Florida State because they had quote unquote tackle bodies, because we have seen them turn down some good prospects because they did not meet the specific measurement that they were looking for on a height and weight chart. Listen, Hilton came out of his Florida visit, said I could see myself in Gainesville, came out of this visit, said listen, they should be fired up coming out of these official visits to these places they're going. All right, but he did come out and says the decision is likely in the early part of football season. He did not narrow down. There is no Final Five list of preferences. It's Florida State, Florida, Penn State, Miami, and UCF. He did not give an order. We asked him specifically when he said the names, is it in that order? He said no, those are just the programs, the Final Five I'm going to consider. Bob, you were there when Ty was talking. What was your takeaway from what Ty had to say?
Actually, I wasn't there. I was at College Town with Camden Pryor. Right. But I think the need for an offensive lineman obviously is huge. I mean, we've talked about this, Fish and Curt and I last week. The board is starting to get settled in. I think with Zandamello going to Southern Cal, we are seeing Ty Hilton. That's a very guy of huge priority. Jonathan Daniels, guy of huge priority. You guys were talking about Jonathan Daniels' height. I mean, he's taller than Mike Norvell by a good bit there in some of our photos. So I think these are two guys that Florida State's definitely in on. It's just a question of where the pieces settle with these top fives, pseudo top fives favorites as far as the summer shakes out.
Yeah. Fish, I know that you had some intel on Friday that seemed to be that maybe Florida was going the other way on Hilton, which kind of led to Florida State being back to number one with him, or what we thought was number one. What's your read on what's going on with Ty Hilton after this weekend and what he had to say to the media?
No, I mean, it seems like it was very positive, the response from him. From what I've heard, Florida's still very much in the picture with him. So he was going to commit to the Gators on one of their visits. So it's interesting. You just never know how the staffs are reacting. Is Florida kind of just holding off on his commitment? A lot of these schools want to see where other guys on the board fall. I don't know Florida Gators board as far as offensive linemen. This kid now moves up on FSU's board and became more of a priority because of the losses of a couple other linemen that were higher up. All of a sudden, these guys become more important. Hilton's a bit of a project, but he is one of these guys that can play inside or out. He's going to need a couple of years to develop at Florida State if that's where he decides to choose. I think it is going to be an in-state decision at the end of the day. From where he's from, I just think that he'll either pick FSU or Florida. Miami's kind of on the outside on this one right now, but he's a good player and would be another good addition. These guys would come in. Florida State will probably return about 14 linemen, so these guys will have a chance to come in, redshirt the first year and get developed. And these are guys you're going to look at like 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road. Will they be starters at that point?
Yeah. Of course, moving to the next recruit that was on campus, and another young man that chose not to speak to the media after his visit, and a guy that a month ago, Fish, we thought was going to help give Florida State the best tight end duo at the class of 2024, along with Landon Thomas, who is also here. But Kylan Fox is down to Florida State, UCF, and Georgia Tech. Will make a commitment announcement on July 4th. Has been for he and his family has been kind of quiet on social media, given the fact that they were here over the weekend. They've been very, visible on social media, but he did not speak. Guys, and whoever wants to expound on it first, how do you guys read the tea leaves on Kylan?
He's probably, Fish, I'm interested in your thoughts. I think it seems like, he's maybe the one guy coming out of the weekend you don't feel quite as good at maybe as going in as you did if you're Florida State. From my understanding, something happened during the visit, not like a big deal or anything, but that not something we really share details about, but just a circumstance that may have affected the visit somewhat for the Fox family. I know mom plays a very active role in that, is very online. And it's an interesting thing. It seems like if I had to bet right now, it wouldn't be Florida State, and I wouldn't have thought that at all a few weeks ago. I think Landon Thomas has been on him hard to kind of be a second tight end in this class, to kind of be, probably the best tight end class Florida State's ever signed. And I think it was trending that way for a long time. And I'd say it's probably, UCF at this point in time. The caveat being, even if, I mean, he's going to announce here in about a week, even if it's not Florida State now, I don't think that's going to stop Florida State from pursuing him. I think they're going to stay on him and hope that, you know, that whatever the details around this weekend were, that I don't think it's a long-term thing. I think it was more just something that happened thing.
Fish, what do you got on Kyle?
Very odd situation. I mean, Florida State's led throughout. This kid really was like, I don't want to say locks because locks don't exist in recruiting anymore. It just seems like something did go south on his visit. He was all FSU. Now all of a sudden it's down to UCF and FSU, and he's thinking of going to UCF. I do think that there's some things that could be worked out, like Curt said. You know, it's also they got to figure out what they're going to do with that tight end room. With Landon, they have 7 guys coming back next year. You know, do some of those guys start to get weeded out and pushed out of the program and end up in the portal? All of a sudden, you have a good season, you could go back and recruit this kid Fox, and they'll probably come back in the fold. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. If they want him, I think they could get him. But there's definitely something there. The mom's very involved. If you check her on social media, she's very vocal about the whole process. So that's always a concern when you have these parents that get too involved in their recruitment. Sometimes that spooks coaches. So hopefully that's not a situation that happened where the mom maybe opened her mouth or something. But I think it's an opportunity. Florida State could still get back in it at the end if they want Kyle and Fox.
Yeah, well, listen, I don't know if it's that cut and dry. I mean, I think Florida State, if they want, I think they tried to make a run on him. That's why they had him in for an official visit. So I'm not sure it's if Florida State wants him, they'll get him. Obviously, Georgia Tech's made a huge push, and UCF. I think you know, some of his comments coming into the official visit were telling. We've all read them, where he was talking about what Georgia Tech had told him about playing as a true freshman and being a starter as a redshirt freshman or a true sophomore. And then, of course, you know, listen, you and several other people believe it's UCF right now. I'm not sure Georgia Tech's not going to have something to say about it, but it is interesting because this looked like all the rumors, all the reading of tea leaves had Florida State as the definitive favorite when all this process started. And it was more that he was doing his due diligence and making some other visits just to reaffirm that he had made the right decision committing to Florida State. And so anyway, it's interesting. He will be committing on July 4th. And so everybody will know here in about 10 days what he is going to do as far as who he's going to commit to. And then we'll see if his recruiting process slows down at all once he makes that commitment. As you said, people are going to still make a run for him. Now we're going to hop back to the receivers, and one of the reasons that Florida State may be allowing a guy like TJ Abrams to kind of fill his oats and go see what else is out there in the world is because of Elijah Moore from Washington, D.C. He was in town for an official visit this weekend, Gonzaga High School. It's down between Florida State and Ohio State, and he's going to announce on July 4th as well. And, guys, I don't think it's close based on what he said. Curt, I believe you were there for this one. And, Bob, I mean, y'all read his you've read his art, you've read the quotes, we've listened to the quotes, and I think one of the more telling things that he said was that he almost committed on Saturday. Who wants it first? Who wants to talk about Elijah?
It's weird. I mean, saying you almost committed. I wondered about this, and you guys can maybe expound. It's almost like now in the social media age, guys want to commit online. They want to have a really cool graphic ready and to build the attention instead of committing at a site where they just took an official visit. So is that part of the storyline either here or with some of these other guys? But yeah, when you hear an Elijah Moore saying, I really thought about it, I was that close. I think that's pretty cool for the staff. And I know the fans are asking, when's the next commitment? Why wasn't there commitment over the weekend? But again, as Fish, Padden, everybody's been saying, Florida State feels very, very good about a lot of these guys who just haven't announced their intentions just yet.
Yeah, and listen, I think there was I think when they talk about commitments, I do think our read on things was, and we heard it from Luke, who we're going to talk about a little bit later, they are expecting some good news to come out of this official visit weekend. And I believe it's exactly what you said, Bob. It's these kids want to be able to make the announcement, to make a production out of it. I don't mean production in a negative sense, but they do want to have their moment in the sun, whether it's doing the hat trick or pulling out a jersey or taking off a jacket and letting the logo of where they're going. It is a special day for these kids. So I do think there's some of that. And, we do believe that, and we even talked about it on the message board. Fish and I did, and I think you guys saw the comments. We feel like they're close on several kids, and I think that obviously this is one of them. Fish, I know you and I kind of did some talking back and forth on text yesterday about Elijah. How do you think he ranks, and from a talent standpoint, with who they have committed and maybe some of the other guys on their board?
Yeah, Listen, the one thing I noticed on film, he's a very good route runner. So he does have, I've always said when you recruit these kids, you want them to have at least one elite trait. I think he's an elite route runner. I don't think he has great speed. If I guess, he's probably a 4.6 type of guy. I don't see the separation on film. He struggles to get behind guys. Now his route running allows him to get separation, but he doesn't have that extra gear. So he's more of a possession receiver. I think he's maybe a better version of like a Malik McLean or an Auden Tate. I think Auden Tate would be a good comparison for him. He's a solid player. He's someone that I think you take in your class because he is a very good receiver. But I don't, if you're expecting a superstar, this isn't the kid. I think he has some nice upside, but like I said, I think he's limited in what he can do on a football field as far as stretching the field. He's not going to be one of those big play threats. I think he's going to be a more underneath route runner, pick up first downs, probably be productive in the red zone. His route running, like I said, that's the one thing that stood out on film. He's very good as a route runner, has pretty good hands, but the one concern for me is that next level speed. He looks more like a Big Ten wide receiver, if you ask my opinion.
Well, he may be if he commits to Ohio State, so we'll see. Although he did say, listen, I'm going home. I'm going to make some business calls. And it's funny that a kid would say that about recruiting, right? I mean,
he did call Florida State the leader.
Yeah,
he said Ohio State was the leader coming in. And he said a week out from his announcement yesterday, in as many words, Florida State was the leader. Your evaluation fits. It's interesting. I will say, I think a little different. I think their tallest receiver commit right now is Camden Fryer, 6'1". So he provides a little more size, which I think is something when you're adding more receivers.
He definitely has the size. I think we got to be careful when we say, oh, this kid is like Ohio State. We don't know how hard Ohio State has two elite receivers. This kid's not in the Jeremiah Smith level and the other kid that they have. This kid sees those other two kids and starts to realize, you know what? When am I going to get on the field with those two other guys? And these kids can have all the confidence in the world, but turn on that highlight film, and some of these kids are not so stupid. They realize like, hey, you know what? I'm good, but I may not be that good. So he could go to Florida State and possibly get on the field. And we don't know what Ohio State's really doing. Is this kid really that high up on their board? I have no idea. I don't talk to those coaches, so we really don't know. I think he's a very good get. Like I said, I don't want people to think I'm knocking him, but I said he does have some limitations. He's not a burner, and it's evidence on film. So,
well, listen, what we do know is he did go on an official visit to Ohio State, regardless of where he ranks on their board. He is being recruited by Florida State, and those are the two schools that the kid has chosen to come down to. And listen, we're not talking about offenses with two running backs and two receivers and a tight end anymore. The base offenses in college football are 3 and 4 wide receivers sets. So, Ohio State can have two studs, but there's always complementary pieces, particularly in these offenses where you got RPOs, and he does create mismatches with his size.
Pat, the only thing I'm going to say is Ohio State's putting out the top receivers year in and year out. This kid looks like none of them. That's just my opinion. Yeah. I don't see him as the level that he's not an Njigba or one of these guys, Marvin Harrison. He doesn't. The two guys they have look like the guys they already have on their team, and they keep producing. This looks like a kid that would go there and transfer out in 2 years. That's just my opinion. I could be dead wrong, but like I said, I don't see him being as high on their board as.
All I'm saying is I trust, like you talked about, I trust Ohio State wide receiver evaluations. There's at least a marginal level of interest. Maybe they see something you don't fish. I don't know, but I'll trust their positional evaluations.
There's no doubt they do a great job. I'm just saying, like, we don't like, they've got two studs. I saw on their message boards that they're looking at one other kid. I watched that kid's film, and I'm like, all right, I understand why they're going after these guys. So, well,
it will all make sense on July 4th, one way or the other. But the fact of the matter is, teams use more than two receivers, and in today's offenses, there are complementary pieces at wide receiver. We see it at Florida State. They've got a guy. They have guys that aren't blazers but have good size and create miss. But anyway, what we do know is that this young man left Florida State with Florida State on top. He feels like he's got a second home, and we're going to find out whether that we'll find out on July 4th whether that offer from Ohio State was committable or not, and whether Florida State is still in the lead. And listen, who knows what's going to happen from there on. But I tell you what, I like the kid's personality when he talked to you. You could tell he enjoyed the visit. He was he the one that called himself the chef, that he told us he was a chef? Was that the kid that was like bummed he didn't win the cooking competition? But anyway, he was a funny kid, a great interview. It was kind of, again, you can't fall in love with personalities on the recruiting trail, but he was one of the better interviews on Sunday, I thought. And we will have a commitment story preloaded July 4th in case he commits to Florida State, and then we'll get a closer look at exactly what kind of player Florida State's getting at that time. Another wide receiver who is in line to possibly take one of the spots that maybe TJ Abrams does not want is James Madison II, 6'4", 200 pounds from St. Thomas Aquinas. Another kid that's going to announce on July 4th. Final five of Florida State, Missouri, Louisville, Michigan, and Oregon. And as Curt pointed out to me yesterday, the funny thing about his top five is he has not visited Michigan or Oregon.
I said he hasn't officially visited. I think unofficially, but not officially. Just that is an important caveat.
Yes, and that's what I meant when I said it was official. Fish, I know you know about this guy, so I'm going to defer to you on this. What are your thoughts on James Madison? I think it's Missouri, Louisville, and FSU. I don't think Michigan and Oregon are.
No, I definitely think those are the three schools. He's from Missouri originally. Ironically, he's very similar to the wide receiver we just talked to. I think the one thing is I know him playing down here. I know he's going against really good competition. I can't say that about the other kids because I don't watch those kids up at there. The one thing is he's a very good football player, and he does step up in moments in games. I remember last year when they needed a touchdown, they could go to him, and he would make a big play. Good kid, comes from a great program. You can never those St. Thomas kids, you always like to have those guys in your program because of the structure, the family atmosphere. Those kids are usually good kids character-wise. They come from they're well coached. He's a very good player. I think he's a kid that Florida State has a very good shot at, but his recruitment's been kind of like you haven't been able to get a real good feel of where he's going. It's been kind of quiet. He hasn't really shown his cards at all. Yes, there's rumors that Florida State's one of his leaders, but it's hard to say with him. He really hasn't shown a whole lot. And I don't know how you guys feel when you've spoken to him. If you spoke to him on this visit, he doesn't really give you a whole lot when he speaks about the schools. So
I want to ask y'all this because he did say something. And listen, some of these kids are not used to being interviewed and are some of them are real comfortable in front of the media. Some of them are not at all. But he did say this, and I just want to and he said this to you, I believe, Curt, right? It was just being able to come back and be reassured about the relationship still being good and everything being intact. We're still building a better relationship. That, of all of the quotes he said, that one kind of made me think, was the relationship not strong at some point? Did something happen during the course of the recruitment?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he did say that, and I mean, I caught him off guard. I was at the airport waiting for him. We have to do that from time to time. It's
we'll talk about
I can't imagine I would give especially a good interview if somebody came up to me in the airport and asked to talk to me. So, but I appreciate him taking the time. Yeah, to me, it's I mean, I talked to him. I mean, you're right. He didn't give away a ton in terms of the different teams. The big thing I talked about, I guess, what's it going to come down to? What's the decision going to come down to? Because it's in a week time, just about 8 days from now. And he said the home atmosphere, what makes me feel home, where I think I'm going to succeed on and off the field. And so to me, I mean, that means I read the quote maybe not as that was lacking for a while, but can I see myself in that way at Florida State relative to the official visits to Missouri, which was home for a long time, and Louisville, where he also officially visited. I'm not sure it was a lacking so much as just like a does this check the boxes. I know. I mean, you talked to Aquinas. He stayed with Conrad Hussey, who was his teammate at Aquinas. He was his player host. It's always interesting when they throw the freshman. I mean, Conrad just got here and is already a player host. I think that speaks to something about Conrad, not that we're talking about today, because they can be particular about some of that stuff of who they're assigning to who. But yeah, I'm interested. He does definitely play it close to the chest. He didn't give away much, but I know he enjoyed the visit. Has that relationship with Dugans. I know. I mean, he talked about as many guys as they have, receivers as they have in the class. He talked about Norvell. A lot of Norvell's message was, "Hey, like we think we might be losing a lot of guys from there after this season," and it was a pitch on potential early playing time.
Yeah, and obviously, we heard a lot about Luke's and Cam Davis, who was here unofficial to help recruit some of these guys this weekend. Camden Fryer, who we'll talk about a little bit later, Landon Thomas. But he did say that Landon and Luke were in his ear the whole time. So that lets you know that maybe he is a priority for Mike Norvell, maybe a little bit more so than what we thought coming into the weekend. Not that because we didn't hear every receiver say that Luke was in my ear the whole time.
He had a big family party with them, and I know Luke had a big family party with them, and I think their families even like spent some time together. I think Luke's dad tweeted and replied to his visit photo yesterday. I saw it seems like, I mean, I know that was a big thing Luke talked about was family and getting to know other people's families. I think they were given a hard sell for sure.
Bob, your take on Mr. Madison?
Hey, keep the Aquinas pipeline going. And that's the big storyline again. Armella, Hussey. Let's see if Madison makes it to Florida State here. The other thing that you guys were talking about, Luke Kromenhoek, Camden Fryer, guys are really pushing as recruiters, to continue to build this offensive class. I think it's a very tight-knit class. Jerry said he was talking with some of the parents. The parents talk to each other, text with each other. It's just part of that, I think, family concept that Mike Norvell likes, that he's trying to build. So we're seeing a lot of just good relationships building ahead of a lot of these decisions for guys like James Madison and some of the others.
Yeah, and that's going to be, I think it's kind of fascinating that James Madison is going to commit on July 4th.
Maybe intentional.
Yeah. I mean, it's named after one of their founding fathers.
Well, and I guess his nickname is Prez.
Yeah. So Star Spangled Banner will be playing in the background as James Madison makes his commitment on July 4th. So he may come out in an Olympic uniform. Who knows? Instead of a Florida State or Louisville or whoever else Missouri, Louisville, Michigan, or Oregon. All right. So now the next guy who seems to have something up his sleeve for tomorrow is wide receiver / we know Florida State's recruiting Jalewis Solomon as a cornerback. We do know that. He said that he's from Schley County, Georgia. He said, among other things, FSU is #1 right now, also considering TAMU, Kentucky, South Carolina, and now this is where it gets tricky, Curt, because he said that he planned to take an OV at Auburn in the fall, and it looked like early because the decision was going to be made in July. Now he's pushed that back to August or September, but about 2 hours ago, he told everybody on Twitter that he has a surprise tomorrow. Now, that could be anything, right? I mean, it could be that he's getting a new car. It could go on vacation. Probably more relates to his recruitment. But, Curt, what is your take on Jalewis Solomon?
Yeah, I think the idea is that's probably going to be a top 5. I mean, you've literally got 5 schools there. I wonder if those are the 5 that make that list. We might be spoiling that for him a little bit. But yeah, no, I mean, he was an interesting one coming into the weekend of figuring out which side of the ball Florida State kind of saw him more on, because he's definitely, I think, a guy who could play receiver or DB at this level, and it seems like it's trending towards DB. That Georgia pipeline's been working well for them recently. A lot of commits in this class from the South Georgia area, a lot of recent players from that area. I mean, they are maybe not cleaning up in Florida like some people might like, but I think they're making up for that in a big way with what they're doing in Georgia. And he's another kid. I mean, that's a list of SEC teams you're going to have to beat out. But like you said, I mean, he's number one coming out of the visit. Liked a lot about the visit. And is there a world where maybe the FSU visit, the more he thinks about it, accelerates his timeline? But potentially, yeah.
Yeah, listen, I think it's going to – I do think it's going to be a little bit more than a top 5 tomorrow. I do think that just based off what he tweeted. It would not shock me. I can't remember if it was I want to say that he said you never know. I think he said something to effect, I'm planning to commit in August or September, but you never know. There was one of the prospects that said something to that effect, but you never know type of comment. It's not what he didn't say. Those weren't his exact words, but basically saying that recruiting is a very fluid situation, and I believe it was Jalewis. I'd have to go back and watch the tape again. Fish, your thoughts on Jalewis Solomon?
Yeah, it's funny. When I go back and look at my notes, I wrote up an eval on him probably about 6 months ago, a year ago, where I basically stated I thought he was built to play defensive back. Looks like a big, thick kid on film. We've talked about it. You can't have enough of these dual athletes where they can play wide receiver, corner. You can see a common theme with Florida State. They don't want to pigeonhole themselves with these guys. You don't want to take a guy and then he doesn't work out and then basically you're processing him. You want that ability to play multiple positions. That is what Jalewis is able to do. He can play on either side of the ball. Has pretty good speed, not great speed, but he's probably in the 4.5 range type player. But I like this kid a lot, and you can't have enough of these type of players on your team. Florida State is doing very good at receiver and DB recruiting. You can't complain about those two areas.
No, they got some studs in there, that's for sure. And another stud that they had on campus this weekend was Micaiah Danzy from Florida High, a local product. And as much as I sit here and talk about kids trying to get away from home, this one looks like it's one that's not going to try to get away from home. He did come out and say that Florida State was number one over Miami and Florida. We thought he was going to take official visits to both those places in the fall, in the summer, but that did not happen. He has pushed those off to the fall, and we are anticipating they'll visit both of those schools. But it was clear that he likes Florida State, that they are the number one on his plate right now. And I do want to thank him for talking to us because my understanding, and listen, as we said, some of these kids are not used to having cameras thrown in their face like we do. And this is a young man that was apprehensive. I found that out after the fact. So I want to thank Micaiah for even giving us a chance to talk to him, because my understanding is he did not want to come out of that building except to leave. He did not want to have to sit and talk to us. But Bob, I'll start with you on Micaiah. We know he's going to run track wherever he goes. He's one of the best 200 and 400 meter guys in the state of Florida. So now he doesn't have speed. He's got stamina in the way he runs. But, just talk a little bit about Micaiah, Bob, and what your thoughts are on him.
A lot of versatility there, right? I mean, a guy who could be running back, could be receiver, spent a lot of time, with CJ Campbell and Coach Yak. So it looks like he might be a running back. Guy could be a good returner too, punt return, kick return with that kind of speed and elusiveness. Pat, like you said, 2-time state champion last May, just a month ago at the Class 2A level with Florida High. So I think, we know Mike Norvell values versatility, that kind of running back receiver type, a guy who's got some serious wheels. I think he'd be a good addition to the mix, but also kind of sounds like a recruitment that's going to go down maybe into November, December too, from what he was saying.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting. He did say that I feel like it could be the right place. When I come here, I feel different compared to other schools. And obviously he has done unofficial visits at Florida and Miami. He did that back early in the spring. So we'll see how it plays out with Micaiah. And of course, it's kind of funny. They had his at probably what would basically be his athletic doppelganger and Zion Reagan's on campus, who was a tremendous looking athlete in his own right. Fish, I'm going to kind of let you start with this one. I know you've watched this film as recently as yesterday. He's a guy that is the 2-time 100-meter state champion for the 5A level in Georgia. Got down to Florida State, Oklahoma, and UGA. Says a decision is likely in late September. And I apologize to Zion. I have his name spelled wrong on this graphic. We'll make that change. But Fish, what are your thoughts on Zion?
Yeah, he's special. I talked about this before with one of the other kids. Elite level trait, his top end speed is special. Not many guys have that ability to do what he does. Even if this guy comes in and does what like a Kermit Whitfield does and wins you a championship on a kick return, they earn their scholarship. This kid's going to make big plays at the next level. He's a speedster. I mean, his ability to get by guys and nobody's catching him. You may as well strike up the band once he gets in the open field because he's going to score a touchdown, and he could score anywhere on the field. I like his ability to return punts and kicks. I think you put him in a Norvell offense that last year, I think Norvell's offense had the highest amount of plays over 20 yards in college football. Well, what happens if you put a guy like this that actually can run by guys and pull away from defenders in that offense? You could have a special type player. You don't want to. There's not many of these type of guys that are this level type talent with this type of speed. And if you can land one of these type of players, you do everything in your power to bring them in because they make play calling a lot easier when you have a player like this on your offense.
Yeah. He kind of got in on him late to a certain extent, but certainly a guy that kind of fits another versatile guy that you can put in the backfield, put it to slot receiver, put in motion. Obviously, would be a tremendous matchup nightmare for safeties and linebackers with his speed. And I have not seen his film, Fish, so I'm assuming he's got great change of direction too. 5'8", 170 pounds.
Can change on either foot, is explosive. I mean, like I said, these are the type of guys. There's not many of them. And when you see them, they look different on film, and he's one of those guys.
All right. Well, the last uncommitted guy was defensive end D.D. Holmes. I'm sorry, he is from Gonzaga High School. I got the high schools confused on the Washington, D.C. kids. But Final Four of Florida State, South Carolina, Maryland. And listen, he is he was a good interview. We don't have the video. I got the audio. This is a kid that is wise beyond his years. Now, I will say this. When they started coming in on Friday, if you said you wanted one guy commit off the way they look, this is the kid I wanted to see them commit. D.D. Holmes is mature physically beyond his years from that standpoint. He's developed physically. He's got great height, great length. His trunk, his lower body is thick. I mean, he looks like a guy that's been in college a couple of years, to be quite honest with you. But Final Four, Florida State, Rutgers, South Carolina, Maryland. He's a very pragmatic kid. He's got the long view on all this. He said specifically that he did not want to make any kind of reactionary decision. He was going to go home, let all the emotion come out of the trip. He said that there was something unique about every one of the schools he had taken an official visit to. Florida State needs a defensive end, right? I mean, the fans are certainly clamoring for a defensive end commitment. Fish, what are your thoughts on D.D.? I mean, can they land him? I mean, or is the distance going to be too much of a factor in this one?
I don't know if distance will be too much of a factor. They've been very productive with the last two defensive ends they pulled from the portal, and this kid kind of fits that same mold, a big, long, athletic kid. They need this Holmes kid in the worst way. I would say that he may be the most important recruit they brought in this past weekend, just because it comes down to need. They're doing very well at receiver and corner, so you're not really worried about that. But you do have some concerns at DN because last year they really didn't bring in a true traditional DN other than the kid from JUCO who was a raw prospect. But you'd like for them to get this kid because he kind of just moves right in once a verse leaves. You could develop this guy that within 2 years he could be that type of player. I mean, you saw Verse develop very quickly at Florida State. I didn't think he'd get to where he did year one. I'm impressed with what they've done with the defensive end. So Holmes is a big-time type player for them to land. They need this kid in the worst way, in my opinion.
There's a world where they lose Verse and Peyton after the season, you know, like where Pat Peyton's gone as well. And I mean, then the need is very severe, and they're probably hitting the portal. But the more, if you can add a guy or two from the high school ranks to play the long game, that's going to be a more sustainable way. And he's a guy who looks like, I mean, could make an instant impact in some way. I mean, I talked about Jared Verse, and you mentioned him too. I think he got to stay with Jared Verse. I think maybe not. I think it was just the first night of his visit, right? But that seems like something that made an impact. I'm not sure they make Jared do that a ton. That's probably not the most desirable thing, especially for a guy who's been around for a while. But I think Jared hosted him the first night, and I think that made an impact with him. It sounded like from the interview.
Come on, Curt. Jared hadn't even been on campus for a year yet. No, he did say it was. He said, "Listen, it was great to see him." Jared was his official visit host the first night, followed by Jaden Jones. He said, it was a good time. I got a lot of insight from Verse. And listen, the guy, it can't hurt to put a potential first-round draft pick as your official visit host. And, listen, he said Verse has a dynamic personality, that he got a lot of good intel from both him and Jaden. Loves Norvell's energy, but listen, this was as good as his interview was. He's very matter of fact and to the point. And again, a kid that sounded in his interview wise beyond his years. But listen, I'll say it one more time. You guys all saw him. He's a pretty looking kid. I mean, he looks the part.
I mean, you look at his film. I'm watching some clips real quick while we're speaking right now. His footage looks a lot like Jared Verse. Very raw coming in. Just you see the athletic ability, him chasing guys down the field. You kind of wonder if this is the same type of kid. What Verse looked like in high school. You put another 30 pounds on this kid. He's 270, doing the same type of things. You got a player that is going to play on Sundays. So he's definitely a major need. I'm of the belief you take as many O-line and D linemen that want to come. If you could get these type of guys, you're never going to shy away. I'd rather have this kid than just another receiver in the class because of the impact that they can make.
Yeah. Listen, he looks the part. He sounds like he knows. He's a bright kid for 18 years old, 17-year-old, whatever he is. It was a good interview. I enjoyed listening to his interview, and of course, we had. Listen, if you're not a subscriber to the Osceola and you're watching, listening, whatever you're doing, you can go to floridastate.rivals.com or theosceola.com and take you to the same place. We've got individual articles on every 12 of the 14 kids that were on campus this past weekend. We have messages out to Jonathan Daniels. We think he's gone into silent mode for a couple of days. He has not talked to anybody that I'm aware of. And then obviously Colin Fox has gone into silent mode. You haven't heard much from him at all either. But we'll see what happens with those guys. But we do have written interviews. We have the videos on our premium message board. Fish has got his fish nuggets, fish bites, fish bits, whatever we're calling them today. But he's got that on the premium message board. You wouldn't have to be a subscriber to get to that. But just so you know, there are about 2,000 people that have read what he had to say already today. So go in there, check it out. Go to floridastate.rivals.com or theosceola.com. All right, guys, let's move on to some guys that we think are virtual locks for Florida State. We're going to go backwards on my list. We're going to start with C.J. Hurd because before we got started, Curt and I were talking, and I had visited with C.J. in Atlanta in April for the Atlanta Rivals camp, and he had told me off the record that there might be some official visits going besides Florida State, and those two of those were going to be Miami and Florida. As far as I know it to be, he has not taken any. But Curt, you said you had some news about he might start taking some again in the fall.
Yeah, I don't think he's entirely ruled it out. I mean, he might not be like you look at the other three. The other three seem pretty locked in as a guy who's not signed yet.
Right.
Can be, and I guess you wonder. I mean, if CJ's taking those visits, if that's the case for him.
Yeah. Yeah. And Fish, how do you read CJ's situation right now? You know, he's a guy that we thought very good about coming into this weekend, and because he had not taken the visits that we thought he was going to take. So how do you feel like they rack up with him?
I mean, anytime kids are still taking other visits, you got to have concern about that. That's just reality. You know, he's a very good football player. I think he's someone that you'd like to keep. He plays a position of major need for FSU. They need some safeties. I think he's a very good fit for what they do defensively. But you never know when these guys start to take visits to other schools. Yeah, and then too, you don't want to get, if you're Norvell and his staff, you don't want a kid like this to start pushing up the value of his NIL and you start getting into this back and forth on a kid that maybe, you know, you may think you could get another kid similar to him in skill set and not have to invest as much financially.
Yeah. Some breaking news breaking in right now while we're live on here. I just saw on Twitter, Ricky Knight, who didn't visit last weekend but the weekend before, just tweeted he is announcing his commitment on July 1st. So
that's good. Week. It's not. It takes a little bit of our play on July 4th. I thought you were going straight to Independence.
No. It was not a 4th on July 4th.
Because we have no independence on Independence Day because of these kids announcing on July 4th.
So we pre-write stories. That's why we pre-write stories.
Just have a story written and his commitment already done.
We'll divide those this week.
We are, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, oh yeah. No, I hear you.
I'm supposed to be on a boat with a beer and not a computer. So
Pat, this thing is 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days. You're not getting out of this, all right, man? Forget it.
I know.
If you get half a day on a boat, that's about all you're getting, man.
Yeah. This is the time where the coaches can finally get away. This is like their one chunk of time. They were all happy to be leaving yesterday as their targets, their recruits they were dealing with.
That was fun to watch. I was very disappointed that I didn't beat my brother off campus. That was very disappointing. He got to start vacation before I did. I thought,
dude, your brother's running from you, man.
I hope Mike docks his pay. But anyway, yeah, those guys were getting out of there pretty fast, and I don't blame them. They've had a long year. I mean, listen, I don't ever. Usually, there's a lull somewhere where you got, God, when's football season going to start? And with the new recruiting calendar, I mean, January was off the charts busy. February was a little bit slower, but obviously March, spring practice, right into April and May recruiting, and all of June. And we're, 50 days away from the start of camp? Something like that. I mean, football season is here, guys. It's crazy to think about. All right, so I'm getting off topic here. Let's go back to Bob waited all day to talk to Camden Fryer yesterday. We thought he had him talking to three guys, and although I did find it funny that Fryer was leaving from College Town. I left what used to be the original version of College Town with his father a lot back when we were in school together. And there were supposed to be a Fryer and a Reagan's leaving from town, the College Town area, which if you go back in the Wayback Machine to 1988, 89, there were a lot of Camden and Fryer and Reagan's leaving College Town area. So anyway, you would have to know the roster from the 80s with Bill Reagan's Matt Fryer to get that one. It was kind of an inside joke. I was disappointed because when I tweeted out or sent it in our group text yesterday, nobody responded, not even Jerry. I thought I was breaking up the monotony of sitting on the benches outside the Moore Center with some humor, but nobody got it. All right, so Bob, what did Camden Fryer have to say? I know he was in here working his butt off with Luke and Landon recruiting, but what was your takeaway from what he said? Obviously, the only thing we do know is that he has taken no other official visits. I do know that he's been to Alabama on a couple of unofficials, but really no reason to think, based on what I've heard, that there's any instability in his commitment.
Yeah, Camden's done a lot of recruiting. He and Luke Croman-Hawk were talking with Ty Hilton, with Makai Danzy. So I think there's a lot of work that they're doing there. I thought it was interesting, Camden reflecting on his own recruitment. He said he wasn't really sure if he wanted to be the legacy guy to follow in Dad's footsteps at Florida State, even though it was a program he's followed forever since he was old enough to remember. But, when Camden shows up here, he's always wearing the old school Florida State T-shirts. He's got the 1993 T-shirts, the old school logos. So respect for history, even though he maybe wasn't sure he wanted to follow in Matt Fryer's footsteps. But I thought, he had some good quotes about that, just saying, Dad built his name here, didn't want to piggyback on it, but Mike Norvell in the recruiting process treated him like he was his own man and said, respect what your dad did here, but this is all about you and me, meaning Coach Norvell and Camden Fryer. So I think that's really cool that that Coach Norvell tried to separate the history a little bit there, and Camden Fryer, and of course now blazing his own trail, creating his own storyline in his words, and trying to get some guys to join the class.
Yeah, I thought it was a nice touch when they did the lanyards for the group of the Fryer family. Matt had his lanyard said number 12, Matt Fryer. And of course I said, Matt, that was very nice that they gave you your old number back. And Camden goes, that's my number. And I said, no, Camden, until you score a touchdown against Miami, that's still your dad's number. So I'm not sure. That probably didn't help the legacy part. But anyway, he laughed. And you're right. He does have some great vintage Florida. He and J.D. Gladden, who's one of the student assistants at Florida State, have some of the best throwback or vintage logo Florida State stuff you'll see. All right, so Landon, we talked to Landon Thomas. He was very didn't have a ton, nothing new. He's locked, seems to be locked in. I think Landon was ready to get home. I think he had a really good time in Tallahassee. Enjoyed his visit immensely, and but he was one of the first guys out. And listen, I think Landon's locked in. Curt, anything on Landon that you took from his interview?
Yeah, I think it was the second time this month he's been here and kind of said, I don't really pick up phone calls from other programs anymore. I think there was a while where Georgia was hopeful that kind of the recruitment wasn't over, that there was a chance they could maybe kind of flip him back again. But I think Georgia's now taken another tight end commit, if I'm not mistaken. So that to me feels like a pretty definitive. They've accepted things and moved on. But yeah, I mean, it was another kind of a formality official visit where I don't think there was anything he needed to see still or anything like that. But I mean, he also put on the recruiter hat. I know he was the guy that quite a few players or recruits mentioned as he was really on me, along with Luke, along with Camden.
Yeah, and of course you mentioned Luke Cromenhawk, who has turned into the spokesperson for this 2024 class, along with Cam Davis, and we had a long interview with Luke, not only about this official visit weekend, where he was part-time recruiter, and of course we got to talk to him about his Elite 11 performance, which Kurt's going to have an article on later in the week. But Bob, listen, this kid has certainly gotten more comfortable. The one thing I see just watching him, he's gotten a lot more comfortable and confident in leading this class. You can see his maturity growing by leaps and bounds. He's very well spoken, says all the right things. It's like he's been to Dale Carnegie School for Public Relations, but his parents have done an outstanding job with him, and so has the staff as they prepare him. But listen, he did say they tried to make this as much about his official visit as the others. Which and listen, we've gotten some feedback on that, right, Kurt? We got some feedback on quit asking about the other kids, but that's he's taken ownership of that role, right? Yeah. He takes pride in that. It's not like he wants to be asked those questions.
I think I asked him at one point, because the first few questions were about that. I threw in was there anything personally you wanted to get out of this weekend? You've been here so many times, we've talked to you about the recruiting, but what did you want? And he kind of said to make this class, this 2024 class, as good as it can be. And then that was his focus coming into the weekend. It wasn't people trying to kind of bogart the interview with him or make it about that. That was kind of what his weekend was about, and he embraced that. And he mentioned James Madison and how he was on him. He mentioned Jonathan Daniels as someone he didn't maybe have a great relationship with coming into the weekend, and they had a great ride together in Coach Norvell's Maybach, the Mercedes, and that he talked about. I mean, they talk a lot of non-football stuff and have a much better bond, and you have to imagine that that helps Jonathan Daniels kind of comfort with Florida State, knowing that's who he's going to be protecting, and have a better idea if he comes here of who his quarterback is going to be most likely. But No, I think we talked about, I mean, we have a story about kind of him as a recruiter. He talks about Elite 11 finals and being out in LA last, 2 weekends ago as well. And I think a story's coming on that. We have footage of him out at Elite 11 on our YouTube you can check out, I know. And I mean, he acquitted himself well on that stage. I know none of us are especially concerned with stars, but I think based off of his performance out there, he should be getting that 4th star in the near future that I think will make Florida State fans happy, because that's something that they care about. And I understand why with the competition with Florida and Miami and all that. But I think he, I mean, has become, even as a guy who's only played 1 year high school football, exactly what Florida State thought they were getting: a leader, as a football player, as a representative of the program.
Yeah, and listen, I think going back to stars, I know fans obviously do care about him.
Sure. And I understand why.
Yeah, but I thought Adam Gorney and John Garcia gave a great explanation of why he was where he was. He had not started before this past season. They had a chance to watch a lot of these other quarterbacks either play on film, in person, at these 7-on-7 events throughout the country. But we had John on the show last week, and John definitively said, listen, he was one of the best quarterbacks there. His ranking will go up. But, it's interesting. He spent a lot of time talking about his family, the Florida State family, and Bobby's even got his mother and his father busy on the recruiting thing. And, you don't really hear a lot about that. What was, it's kind of unique to what we get told most weeks, right? We don't hear a lot about the parents recruiting other parents and those kind of things.
I think that's what's cool about this class is a lot of these kids have been committed to Florida State long enough where, the families have started a text chain or they've met on these visits, whether they're official or unofficial. Again, Luke's been committed, what is it, like 16 months now? It seems like it's been a really long time. So first of all, a lot of credit to Mike Norvell and the staff for identifying Luke Kromenhoek early and then seeing that progression and enjoying that he's been locked in for this entire ride. And I think, like you guys were talking about, he's getting to spend time with prospects, on a ride in the back of the Maybach. But once he texts, down the road to a Jonathan Daniels, to a Ty Hilton, to whoever, it's, we had a fun time in Tallahassee on this visit. Our families are talking and texting. It's just part of building that really good connection. And we'll just kind of see how it all plays out with some of these targets.
And I'm sure it did not hurt to have an Elite 11 quarterback on his official visit when you had, 6 receivers in? About 6 receivers. A lot of receivers. Yeah. A lot of receivers in on official visits. But, listen, and like I said, he did talk extensively about both his role as a recruiter and as at the Elite 11, and we'll have more from that. The article on his recruiting and his official visit weekends are on the site, and Curt will have the Elite 11 story coming out later in the week. Guys, it's been a very busy month. Now, listen, I don't, as we sit here thinking out loud, I don't even know. We will be back at some point this week with another Seminole Sidelines. We will be back on Wednesday with recruiting news if Jalua Solomon's tweet does reference a commit, and if he does commit to Florida State, we'll be back with that on Wednesday. And periodically we will have recruiting news. But the NCAA recruiting calendar did go dead this morning at 12:01 a.m. and it'll be dead through up to the last full week of July. Then that'll open back up right before camp starts. So you will see offers go out from the program still, but you will not see anybody on campus. I think that everyone in that Moore Center is fine with that. And I know the guys that cover recruiting. I love college football, but I'm glad the dead period has started. But listen, Bob, just tell what will our schedule be as we move forward with Seminole Sidelines? We're still going to go Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Okay.
Yeah, we're going to stick with Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I know Aria's got a couple interviews booked, so you may see some not necessarily football-specific interviews to come, but, a couple of just good one-on-one interviews with folks in the coming weeks, in addition to recruiting and some other discussions.
Probably some position previews thrown in there.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's been a heck of a first 6 months of the year, guys, and it has gone by fast. And we are getting back through football season. Everybody survived this weekend. I thought the coverage was really good. I thought we did. I thought it was a lot of fun. As Curt said, being down there, it can be hot, it can be boring at times, but it's good to be out there hanging out with everybody and getting to talk about football, tell stories about players, coaches. It was a good week. It was a good time spent out there on Friday and Sunday.
Bob, is that promo code still good through today?
Yeah, you can use the promo code FSU Visits. I think that's through August 10th. It'll be free use of the Osceola. I'll read all the premium stories, the message boards. We've got our position previews. That series is going on right now.
Probably the first week of preseason camp too, right?
Yeah, I think that'll get you about a solid week of preseason camp. So Rivals, I know they do a lot of those promos where it's right up to camp, and they actually kind of maybe threw in a bonus week there. So it kind of gets you in the door where you can read a lot of things. You can read, what Fish has dropped on the message board in terms of some nuggets and intel, and obviously some thoughts from all of us on the message boards too.
And I think today's the last day, right? So go now. Like if you've been debating it, this is that window. We won't have another deal like this probably for a minute.
Yeah. Well, listen, if you're a listener, viewer, but you're not a subscriber to the Osceola, please go to floridastate.rivals.com or theosceola.com and check us out. We do have some free content on the front page, but as we get closer and closer to the National Signing Day, early National Signing Day in December, most of the 2024 recruiting stuff will be behind the paywall. You get Fish's notes. We've got live message board interviews with the kids from this past weekend, so you can hear everything they say straight from their own mouths. We got the written articles on everyone, and then of course we do have we had coverage of Dave Van Hallinger's memorial service, which was held yesterday for Coach Van. It was a great Saturday for Coach Van. It was a great event. About 175 people. Mickey Andrews, Jim Gladden, but Jerry wrote a nice story on Dave in that event. So it was nice to see some former players, basketball, football, and it did. Remember, we hear a lot about family with Florida State and Mike Norvell now. It was fun to see the original Florida State family get back together to celebrate Coach Van. But we'll be back on Wednesday in some form or fashion. For Bob and Curt, I'm Pat Burnham, and we will see you on Wednesday for our next edition of Seminole Sidelines. Have a great day.